Hello and welcome to this video / presentation about what is audio engineering. So I'm going to be using the audio engineering term to cover the entire recording process, and I'm going to be avoiding too much jargon or complicated terms because this video is not really targeted at advanced audio engineers or people who are doing this as a profession. This is more targeted towards people who would like to be doing this and also would like to know a little bit more about how it all works, how music's put together. The term audio engineering usually refers to just the mixing side of things, whereas again I'm going to focus on the entire process of putting together a song. So first off, who am I? So my name's Aaron. I'm a audio engineer. I've been recording music for a very long time, about 15-20 years now, and I've been recording bands throughout New Zealand, my own band, my own music, as well as bands I've played with, and I've just really had a passion and love for audio and audio engineering most of my life. I have also worked for the last 10 years or so as the category manager for audio at one of the largest retailers in New Zealand, where I was choosing and ranging the audio products. I'd say easily 50+% of all the home audio and portable audio products that New Zealand consumers brought over the last 5 or 10 years were put into those stores by me. So I've had a long history of audio through the listening and love of a massive variety of music, the actual recording process and recording myself and other musicians, as well as the playback systems and choosing those playback systems, hearing some of the best in the world, $80,000 headphones, just experiencing some of the coolest stuff, and choosing those products for New Zealanders to listen to their music. So I am very much about audio. Who are you? So you may be somebody who is just interested in as to how music is put together, how a song appears on the radio or appears on Spotify. You might just want to know or see behind the curtain a little bit and see how it's all done. You may also be a budding audio engineer. You may love audio engineering and have your own project studio. Or you may want to start up your own project studio and record your own music at home. So this is suitable for you. First I'm going to have a breakdown of audio engineering. Then I'm going to give you a couple of examples of audio engineering. Then I'm going to get you to help me mix a song. So obviously you won't be physically doing this with me, but you can see how a song is basically mixed. And next time you'll get to mix a song together, and that'll either could be in person, if I come to your place and spend a set time training you up on audio engineering, and we'll get to mix a song together. Otherwise it could be through a future video where I might upload some multi-tracks for you guys to have a play with and do some mixing. So basically this time it's going to be all about the theory, and then next time we meet up around the subject, again hopefully in person, we'll be able to do some practical examples of audio engineering. But first I'm going to stress a very important point, and that is music is art and art is personal. So things I'll be discussing here or things I'll be suggesting or explaining, it is all part of a big art form in which there is many interpretations. Something that I might suggest might not sound so good, you might think sounds amazing. Something that you might like, I might not. A certain, like a drum kit being loud or quiet, or a way something's recorded, it's all personal, it's all art, and those different interpretations are what really create music and the art that it is. And that's why you have such a massive variety of music out there, and massive variety in genres, and even within the same genre there's a massive variety of sounds again, so keep that in mind. So what do you already know? What is audio engineering? Audio engineering is, strangely, what it says. So it's engineering audio, which means to engineer, to work it, to manipulate it, to change it in some way. What is the main goal of an audio engineer? So the main goal of an audio engineer is to manipulate and change sound for somebody, so for an artist or for a company. What are some examples of audio engineering that you hear in everyday life? They're everywhere, whether it be on Spotify, YouTube, on TV shows, on movies, on the radio. It can be as simple as when you watch a news broadcast. If you've watched the news and somebody is talking, say, in front of a loud environment, so in front of a loud factory or trucks or vehicles on a road or whatever, they're talking next to something that's quite loud. When they talk, you might notice that the sound sometimes drops down a little bit, and the person's voice is nice and clear, and you can totally hear what they're saying. If you think to a time that you might have recorded yourself on your phone or on a camcorder in a similar environment, you would have sounded awful, potentially. You would have had your camera or phone like this, you'd be recording yourself, and those noises would have probably overshadowed your voice at times, and it would have been quite hard to hear. Yet on the news broadcast, it's totally clear. And the reason for that is audio engineering. So an audio engineer has manipulated the sound of the background noise and also the person's voice to sound separate and clearer. So that is an example of audio engineering in everyday life. Audio engineering is the art of capturing sounds, the art of crafting the sounds, and the art of mixing sounds. And so right now I'm going to have a closer look at the mixing sounds side of things. Okay, so mixing sounds. Imagine, if you will, you are an audio engineer and you've just been sent a bunch of sound files to mix into a song. So, an artist has sent you their recordings from a studio of a bass guitar, a electric guitar, a singer, drums, that sort of thing, and they want you to make it into a song. Again, from the outside it might seem like a simple enough thing, but the truth is it's not. It's just a bunch of different sounds that somehow have to be married together to sound good. So what do? Where do you start? So in a professional studio or even a project studio at home, you would load these files into what's called a DAW. So what does DAW stand for, or DAW? So DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation. In a second I'll show you a DAW with a song in it all ready to mix, and I just have a think, what does this remind you of? Okay, so here we have a DAW. So here we have a bunch of tracks. Sorry, I'll move this over. We have a bunch of tracks in which the sound files have been loaded into. Again, and soon in the future videos or training sessions, I'll go over exactly what these are and how they all work. But just for now, you have a different track for the kick drum, snare, overheads, all the different elements that have been recorded, and you have two ways of manipulating them. One is here and one is here. Here you have a bunch of volume controls and panning controls, which again I'll go into more detail, but I'll just ask you to think, what does this look like? So if you think to any time you've seen a picture of a studio or videos of a studio, you've seen a big mixing desk or a big mixing console, and that's basically what this is. These are the faders that you will have seen on the big desks in a professional studio. A digital audio workstation is basically a software version of a mixing desk in a large studio. So over the last 20 odd years, they've managed to take all that really big expensive hardware and consolidate it down into a software form for you to be able to use wherever you are, which is really cool because it cuts down the time it would take to build and acquire all that gear, as well as to hook it all up and move it all about whenever you're wanting to change anything, and that allows you to be more flexible as an artist, and be a lot more creative when the creativity is sparking. It's really cool. So I'm going to go into more detail on mixing here. I'm going to give you a couple of the key terms around mixing, many of which you've heard before, and a few definitions as to what they mean. So first up, we've got balance. Then we're going to cover off equalization or EQ, compression, effects, editing, and mastering. So balance is turning each instrument up and down until they sound about right. Some would argue that the entire process of audio engineering is balancing, and some people even call it balance engineering, where you've got a limited amount of space, or sound space, in which you can have all the instruments, and it's about balancing them so that each instrument is represented reasonably well, and the key instruments are louder and the not so key instruments are quieter, and obviously things you don't want at all are not turned up at all. Equalization or EQ. This is making the best bits of an instrument louder and the bad bits quieter. You will have used an EQ, no doubt, sometime in your life, on a stereo or a device of some kind to turn the bass up and down or the treble up and down. Very common. The EQs in audio engineering, of course, are a lot more detailed, a lot more precise, and actually a lot of fun to play around with. Compression is taking an instrument that is quite dynamic, which means going from loud to quiet and making it less loud to quiet. It's a little trick where it pulls down the loudest parts of a sound and therefore makes the overall sound a little bit more consistent. This is commonly used in pretty much every instrument. Vocals, for example, if someone's singing, the loud parts of their vocals, when you're standing next to them, can be deafening, whereas a quiet part can be not quite nice and you'll lean into. On a recording, it doesn't typically work like that. You typically, especially in pop, you typically have the volume of the singing around about the same throughout the entire song, with very slight variances. So again, you don't typically pull yourself away from the speaker when things get suddenly loud, and that's because of compression. So effects are messing around with an instrument in a cool way. There are many effects out there. Common one is distortion, which is commonly used on guitar, also on vocals, and pretty much every other instrument out there, you'll be surprised to know. So distortion is something where it creates a harmonic, pleasant harmonics typically, and it naturally compresses the sound, so it gets rid of some of that dynamics, and gives a thicker sound. You could have delay, which is where someone says something or makes a sound like this, and it repeats. So for example, a delay could be whereas you can see I was only doing it once, but yet it was repeating itself naturally. Another effect could be reverb, which is where you add space to a room or to a sound to make it sound like it's in a different place or a different space, and it can also just create the fullness and warmth that you might want in your recording. There are many effects. So editing is where you cut words or notes or sounds out of a piece of recording, or putting words or notes in. You could re-record part of it if you stuffed up a performance, for example, or you might cut out swear words if someone they're recording, then you could cut out that swear word. There's all sorts of techniques that could be used there. And finally, mastering is giving the song a final dust off or polish. It can be where you'll bring the volume up to a consistent volume amongst all your songs, or if you want it to match the volume of some released artist's work, it could be where you want to give the song's a consistent kind of sheen or sound overall, as you will hear on albums when you've purchased albums in the past, that they all sound like they're from the same album, and yet the next album sounds different. That comes in the mastering process. It can also be the opportunity to control some parts of the song as a total thing. When you're mixing, you typically treat each element and you build each element into a song, whereas mastering, you might look more at the song itself and treat the song itself as something to edit and just tidy up a little bit. So now we're going to have a listen to a song called I'm Alright by Angels and Amplifiers. Now we're going to listen to a couple of different mixes, about 6 in total. And I want you to hear the difference between these mixes. Just listen very carefully and see if you can pick up any differences, nuances, or difference in the sounds of these mixes. Think of some words to describe the difference between each mix. Bright, dull, loud, quiet, muffled, clear, distorted. Think of some terms when you listen to each of these mixes that defines it against the previous version. And for each song, if you've got a pen and paper, or if you would like to, maybe just jot down a couple of those words that you're hearing that help you describe the differences between each song. And final thing is, do you think any of them sound bad? And if you do, why? Again, music is art. Art is personal, so these are very different versions, or some are very similar, of the same song. Some you may like, some you might not like, and that's fine, that's art. So again, we'll listen through them, jot down words that describe the difference, and let me know, or just let yourself know which ones you do and don't like, and try and justify it as to why.
Right for change, it's changing all around. I know the reason. I know the season's right for change, it's changing all around. Right for change, it's changing all around. I know the season's right for change, it's changing all around.
So what did you think? So again, you would have heard there were many different versions in there. It was exactly the same song with exactly the same tracks recorded or used as the basis for each of the mixes, and each of the audio engineers basically created their own versions of that song. Some had certain instruments louder and others had them quieter, and some had more distortion, some had more cleaner vocals, some had more muffled vocals. There was all sorts of different choices made in the art of mixing that song by different people, different audio engineers. So in order to be able to do this, to be an audio engineer, you need to train your ears. You need to know what you want to hear. You need to know where you want a song to be going. And that takes years of training and years of listening, accurate listening to music and sounds, to try and find those things that really excite you and excite your ears. You need to learn how to hear the issues in something, how to hear a problem in certain frequencies that might be, making a sound bad. So you might have a recording of a guitar and it might have a little bit too much bass, or it might have a little bit too much treble, and it's not always just a case of turning up and down the bass or treble. It can be isolating the frequencies where those issues are and attacking them specifically, so as to not damage the rest of the overall sound. It's being able to hear what is good and what is bad, and again, that's based on your opinion. It can also be important to know what other people's opinions are. So it can be good to get used to what an average pop fan might think is a good sound for a kick drum or a vocal or reverb or something like that. Or if you're just wanting to record and make your own music for you, it's good for you to know and understand what is good and bad for you. And that can mean the difference between putting together a mix and then playing it back in a car and thinking, oh no, what have I done? That sounds awful. It can be finding those problems, to fix those problems while you're mixing and engineering, to avoid those sorts of issues. They tune their ears to hear the big difference a little change will make. So a very slight increase in volume on certain frequencies, or a little bit of extra reverb here or a little bit less there, like those very subtle changes are the things that will not be as noticeable for the average listener. They won't be able to point out the change, but their brain will be more excited and more attracted to it, and enjoy it more, and the emotions will be affected more by those very careful, delicate changes. And again, trained or an experienced audio engineer can do that and has trained their ears to be able to do that. A beginner won't be so good at it, and they'll typically have too much reverb on something, too much EQ, because they if they're not, they need to do enough so they can hear it, and at that point it's usually too much. In saying that though, EQ and reverb and all those effects can be used in a creative way to make drastic changes to sound, and that's cool too, if that's the intention. If you're intending on taking a natural sound and just enhancing it very subtly, then you need to be able to do little changes that will make a little difference, and in turn a big difference on the overall result. An audio engineer needs to be able to hear where a mix should be before they get there. They will have the vision in their mind of the sound, and they'll know how to get themselves there through the experience that they have. They'll know what to cut, what to turn up, what to change, and that's again something that comes from years of listening and experimenting with audio engineering. So again, audio engineering is mixing sounds. Okay, so now I'm just going to have a quick muck around with the song I showed you earlier, where I'm going to bring up the kick drum or turn down the kick drum, or bring up the vocals or turn down the vocals. I'll just have a little bit of a play around, and you can hear how I can control each element of the song, each instrument in the song.
Changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. You're telling piece of you. Could we let this slip away, slipping through my hands? How can the darkness blind the day? From you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning out the corner, put it back in order. But no, I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
An audio engineer is like a ninja. The art is making big improvements in a very small way. When you listen to the radio, you wouldn't typically or shouldn't typically be thinking, wow, that's a cool audio engineering trick. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's elements of the song that just stands out, like if it's got auto-tune on the vocals and it's done in a very obvious way because it's part of the style of the song, that's okay. But typically you shouldn't be thinking, wow, that was a cool volume increase or change or a bit of reverb put on there for a second and compression trick. But yet on the flip side, you definitely know when a good audio engineer has not worked on a song, because you typically don't want to listen to the song because it typically just sounds bad. You just don't like it. It sounds all messed together and just doesn't sound clear, doesn't sound nice, doesn't sound engaging. So, is an audio engineer actually a musician? Well, yes. And this is why every mix sounds different. This is why that song you heard earlier with 6 different mixes, each one of them sounded different. They were mixed by a different person who had different tastes and they emphasized different parts. A audio engineer plays a song or a mix a bit like a piano. They have all the elements, which you could consider would perhaps be the keys, all the different tracks of guitar, vocals, all that sort of thing. And they decide at different parts of the song which parts need to be louder and which parts need to be quieter, which parts need to be potentially slower or faster, and they basically massage and play the song like an instrument, which is why some incredible songs have incredible mixes, and that's as a result of an incredible audio engineer. So an audio engineer is basically another musician who sits on top of the band and makes their work better. Okay, so before I go, I'm just going to do a quick comparison of audio engineering live sounds versus recordings in a studio. A number of you may have some experience playing in live venues where you've had a sound engineer mixing your music for you, or you've done it yourself, and basically a difference between what you're doing there versus what you're doing in your studio, at your home studio, is that you can basically you have more time than you do when mixing a live event. So when you're mixing a live event, you've got to do it there and then. You've got to go. Whereas with recording in a studio, you can take a little bit more time with your microphone placement and with your volume settings and levels and all that sort of thing. You've got more time to be able to fix issues, and you've got less pressure and stress to get it right. So again, when you're doing it live, everyone's there, everyone can hear you, and they can hear if the volume of the vocals suddenly jumps up or jumps down, or if there's a massive kick of feedback in the guitar or anything like that. So basically, when you're recording in a studio, you have a lot more comfort and less of those time pressures and stresses. And that's a good thing, because there's going to be a big difference between listening back to a recording versus being there and hearing a live performance. On a live performance, there actually is a bit more forgiveness for bum notes or that sort of thing, or some timing errors in the performance, whereas on a recording there is not as much forgiveness, because the more you listen to it back, the more that kind of is amplified for you and sticks out and becomes more of a nuisance and a issue. Subtle ones can be part of the art, part of the style, part of the class or the groove, but obvious mistakes can be unbearable on a recording. So yeah, so that's just some of the differences between live and studio audio engineering. Okay, so that's it for this introductory course as to what is audio engineering. I'd recommend listening to music and just try and hear some of those things we've talked about. The goal is that I will continue with these courses, again, whether they be in person and some on video on YouTube like this, where I'll go into more detail on some of the techniques and styles. I'll show you how music is captured, and also how it is engineered into songs. But for now, just listen to music and hopefully you'll hear it a little bit differently, and hopefully you'll have a basic understanding or a better understanding as to what audio engineering actually is.